From 2020 to 2024, Democrats saw a staggering drop-off in support at the presidential level, with some 19 million people who voted for Joe Biden staying home or not mailing in their ballots in 2024. A new survey conducted by YouGov suggests Biden's support for Israel's unrelenting assault on Gaza played a surprisingly large role in the decision-making of those previous Biden supporters who didn't vote. The top reason those non-voters cited, above the economy at 24% and immigration at 11%, was Gaza, which a full 29% cited as the top reason they didn't cast a vote in 2024. Looking narrowly at states that swung from Biden in 2020 to Trump in 2024, the number is smaller. But in those states, 20% still cited Gaza as the reason they didn't vote again. The poll was paid for by the Institute for Middle East Understanding, which has been an outspoken critic of Israel's assault on Gaza. Now, before firmly demonstrating that Gaza cost Democrats the election, a handful of caveats are important. So even if October 7th and the resulting genocide had never happened, it's fair to assume some number of those non-voters still would not have voted and would have cited a different top reason for not voting. Citing a top reason for not voting is different than it being the only reason that you didn't vote. And because the turnout drop-off was smaller in swing states, Gaza may not have been decisive on its own. Whenever surveys confirm views we already hold or tell us things we want to be true, it's worth approaching their findings with increased skepticism. Still, even the most biased poll can only manufacture so much of a response. Even if the true numbers aren't as stark as this survey found, the direction that it points in is clear. Biden's ruthless support for Israel's genocide and the refusal of Harris to break with him hurt her among voters who stayed home. A previous survey, taken during the election by YouGov and similarly sponsored by IMEU, found strong evidence that nominee Kamala Harris would be significantly boosted by breaking with Biden on Gaza and applying real pressure on Israel. Harris chose not to do so. Breaking with Biden on Gaza could have had knock-on effects elsewhere, as Harris never successfully answered a question that dogged her throughout her campaign. What would she have done differently than Biden, or what would she do differently than Biden in the future? Harris eventually settled on the unsatisfying answer, my presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I'll bring my life experiences, something like that. My name's Kamala Harris. I'm not Joe Biden. Now, in one emblematic response, she has a debate, for instance. Check this one out.
Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans.
Yeah, okay, so that's not an answer. But breaking with Biden on Gaza, of course, that risked losing voters who supported his policy. But a close look at this survey shows that the risk was low compared to the reward from breaking with him. Voters who were with Biden in 2020 and stuck with Harris in 2024 were asked if breaking with him on Gaza would make them more or less enthusiastic about voting for Harris. And by a 35 to 5% margin, they said breaking with him would have made them more enthusiastic to vote for Kamala Harris, with the remainder saying it would have made no difference. Non-voters said that if she had broken with Biden on Gaza, they'd have been more likely to vote for her by a 36 to 10 margin. Meanwhile, Democrats' unshakable commitment to the war also blended with concerns that the party was not focused on issues that mattered to Americans, as I argued previously. The survey, meanwhile, showed that the issue was most salient among white voters, 34% of which said it was the top reason they didn't vote for Harris, and Hispanic voters at 27%, while less so with black voters at just 9%. And so, Emily, like I was saying, you always have to take polls like this with a grain of salt. Mm-hmm. And you can prime a poll. You can, if you're asking questions about Gaza, then maybe Gaza rises a little bit in your mind. If Gaza happens to be in the news when you pick up the phone, pollsters have found that heavily influences how much, how much it comes up in an answer. If the news is talking about the deficit constantly, you call somebody up and ask them if they're concerned about the deficit. People are like, yeah. But if the deficit's not in the news, then it completely vanishes from
Right, if you
answers.
ask on October 8th about the deficit, you'll probably get different answers.
Yeah. So all that said, you can't manufacture a number that high if there isn't something real underneath it.
Totally.
And I do think that it blended more generally with the problems that Democrats had. If you lose that many voters, 19 million, and a third of them say that the top reason that they didn't vote for you was the way that you were, because you didn't break with Biden on Gaza, that's millions of people. Not every single one of them votes for you, but if some do, that matters.
Yeah, it reminds me of our DNC coverage, actually. It was sort of walking through the protests. It was smaller. The protests, the demonstrations at the DNC were smaller than a lot of people expected. And the media kind of used that as an opportunity to brush aside that narrative. But actually, this was always going to be a marginal election. It was always going to be an election that came down to just a little sliver of a percentage in Michigan, Wisconsin, and places like that. So it doesn't matter that the protest is smaller than people expected if it represents a small but significant chunk of the broader public. Like we were saying that this was going to be significant for a long time. And I wonder, Ryan, if when you look at those numbers, you see perhaps something specifically about college kids, Michigan,
Certainly
Michigan
young
State.
people, yeah. And we can put some, we'll write about this at Drop Site and put the link in the poll in there. Yes, young people, certainly.
It's not.
You can see the numbers like for young people, it's a higher concern than it is for older people.
Well, and I'm going to say something that's going to sound maybe a little crass, but I think if you're picking up on the vibes on TikTok and other places over the course of the last 6 months plus, it wasn't cool to go out and vote Kamala Harris and put your I voted sticker on if you were on a campus. It was kind of cringe specifically because of this issue, because Democrats lost so much just moral credibility, I think, with a lot of young people because of this issue.
Right, and I think that's a good way of putting it. So in everybody probably experiences this in their own life. And actually, if you're watching this show, you might be the person in your social circle, or maybe several of you in your social circle watch this show and talk about it. And then you talk about what you watched here and what you read elsewhere to your friends. And so your friends then are kind of on the outer rung there. They're getting informed by you, and we are informing you. Like that.
Right.
It's kind of the direction that it goes. And so while you might love what Lena Khan is doing, or might love what the NLRB is doing for workers around the country, you're less likely to share that with your friends if at the same time they're facilitating a genocide. So you know what? I'm glad that Lena Khan's doing good stuff, but I'm not going knocking on doors telling people about it while they're doing this other evil thing. And so I think you're right that it became, particularly on social media, where everybody's getting their news.
Yeah.
It became very uncool and unpleasant to say nice things about people who were doing this blanket evil thing.
I think that's exactly right. It literally fell out of fashion, and I don't mean that again in a pejorative sense. Politics for a lot of people, if you're looking at popular culture and it just sort of like osmosis creeps into our world, the vibes were sucked out of the Democratic Party with young people because of this.
Yeah, and what worked for Biden in 2022 on that level was that Dark Brandon meme.
Yeah, even though he was old.
Yeah.
People say oh, Biden's so elderly, Nancy Pelosi so elderly, how could young people ever vote for them? Well, it's young people love Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
They love Bernie Sanders. Donald Trump just significantly improved his share of the youth vote. He's also old.
Yeah, and think about why Dark Brandon worked. For that to land, and for people to be able to say Joe Biden is cool because Lena Khan is cool, because NLRB is cool, because he got out of Afghanistan. What people had to do is flip his entire identity and create a new identity for him.
It was ironic.
Yeah. It's okay, yeah, we acknowledge that Joe Biden sucks.
Yeah.
We don't support Joe Biden. We support Dark Brandon.
His alter ego.
His alter ego,
Right.
Who is doing these cool things. And we're all right, you know what? We can't get much in the U.S. we'll take that. That works for us. And it legitimately helped to boost the vibes, and it worked. You're not doing a Dark Brandon meme with the lasers coming out of the eyes when he's vaporizing children on a daily basis.
Or with Kamala Harris, you can't keep Brat sticking, right? Like Brat stuck for a few weeks, and then after it just became impossible. It became extremely cringe because I think young people were so. And if you're not on TikTok, I'm not on TikTok, honestly, but I try to pay as much attention as I can.
I joined
to the
just
trends.
the other day, so I could get in right before they ban it.
Amazing stuff coming out of Ryan's learning process, which he's broadcasting on X as he's like trying step by step through TikTok. It's great. But if you were paying attention to that, it was so clear. And this is again why a lot of hawks want to just ban TikTok, because the propaganda was not working on this particular issue. Like this was a huge top line problem for young people towards the Biden administration that Kamala Harris represented.
Yeah, so it's not Gaza alone, but Gaza prevented Harris from getting any momentum with people who would have then been interested in talking about the other things. Meanwhile, she wouldn't even support Lina Khan.
Right.
She wouldn't even publicly come out and say that she would reappoint Lina Khan.
No, she'd send Mark Cuban out. But
to say that they're not going to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, maybe it was, maybe she never had a shot, but.
I don't know. Well, you crunched some numbers. People can go back and look in 2020 about Joe Biden, who I think is actually a weaker candidate in some levels than Kamala Harris, and how young voters in Pennsylvania probably put him over the edge. So that's real.
Absolutely.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.